Hello and welcome to the dungeon. I'm your host Rob, and in today's video we're going to be taking a look at one of my favorite Sorcerer Subclasses, the Divine Soul Sorcerer, as you probably noticed in the title. I actually couldn't believe that I hadn't covered this subclass before. Now, to be honest, I did do a Paladin Sorcerer multi-class where I went through a character that I'd actually played and talked about that build, and I did use Divine Soul Sorcerer in that build. But it wasn't really a Divine Soul Sorcerer specific video. It was more just about, here's how I built a character and the choices I made, right? It wasn't really about the Sorcerer itself. And, honestly, I could have chosen a lot of different Sorcerer subclasses. That just happened to be the one I picked. So today we're going to be looking at the Divine Soul Sorcerer. And one of the reasons I really love this class so much is, of course, because of one of our very first abilities, where we get the ability to choose any spells we want from the Cleric spell list or the Sorcerer spell list every time we gain, new spells of that appropriate level, right? So obviously, you can't pick 9th level Cleric spells when you only got 1st or 2nd level spell slots. You know what I'm saying? But anyways, this just opens up so many possibilities, and I think that the interaction of different Metamagics with spells from the Cleric spell list really give us some intriguing opportunities to, really play around with the, either our action economy through things like Quicken Spell, or even things like Extended Spell on buffs or debuffs. Things like, even like the Distance Metamagic, which is one that I usually don't take, suddenly starts looking really good on a class that might have option to a lot of like Cleric touch spells, for example. So I think that it's a very intriguing possibility where we can combine some of the best, the greatest hits of the Cleric spell list with the Sorcerer spell list as well, and really get the best of both worlds. However, there is one problem, as you probably already guessed. Since we are a sorcerer who is, not from Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, our spells known list is still really, really small. And so having like a billion possible choices can sometimes be a little overwhelming when you get to pick like one of those choices when you level up, and that can be a bit of an issue. So we're gonna talk about the subclass in general. We're gonna talk about like what kind of feats I like with it, which metamagics I generally kind of like, and then we're gonna talk about some of the Cleric spells that I might want to take. Now, I'm not going to go through all the Sorcerer spells because this list, could be way too long. Obviously, things like Haste, Counterspell, Slow, Hypnotic Pattern, like Absorb Element, Shield, all those kind of spells are going to be great regardless. And so, if you are normally going to take those spells, feel free to still take those spells, obviously. We're only going to be going through the ones that we might be tempted to take from the Cleric spell list and just, add them to our repertoire. So anyways, right at level 1, we get Divine Magic. When your spellcasting feature lets you learn or replace a Sorcerer's cantrip or Sorcerer spell of 1st level or higher, I cannot read, you can choose the new spell from the Cleric spell list or the Sorcerer spell list. You must otherwise obey all the restrictions for selecting the spell, and it becomes a Sorcerer spell for you. We just talked about this. That is awesome. In addition, choose an affinity for the source of your divine power: good, evil, law, chaos, or neutrality. You learn an additional spell based on that affinity, as shown below. It is a Sorcerer spell for you, but doesn't count against your number of Sorcerer spells known, which is nice because, as we already mentioned, that's always an issue for most Sorcerers. If you later replace a spell, you must replace it with the spell from the Cleric spell list. So, Cleric spell only if you replace it. But anyways, so if your affinity is good. Oh, and by the way, note that this doesn't mean your character has to be good or lawful or evil or whatever. It just means you have this affinity because of, the divine blood that's flowing through you. But in the game of Dungeons and Dragons, there's like a ton of like evil gods and, neutral gods, good gods, etc., right? So just because, maybe you got your power through, like one of the evil gods, like Bane or something like that, right? To use Forgotten Realms as a quick example. That doesn't mean you're evil. In fact, maybe that's kind of your redemption story. You're trying to like overcome the curse of your bloodline kind of thing. But it does mean that your affinity might be, shady to say the least, right? So anyways, good, you get cure wounds. Evil, inflict wounds. Law, bless. Chaos, bane. Neutrality, protection from good and evil. And the truth is that all those spells are pretty decent actually, so you can't really go wrong with any of them. But like I said, if you do want to replace one of them, you have to replace it with a cleric spell, not a sorcerer spell. Favored of the gods. So also at first level, divine power guards your destiny. If you fail a saving throw or miss with an attack roll, you can roll 2d4 and add it to the total, possibly changing the outcome. Once you use this feature, you can't use it again until you finish a short or long rest. This is really nice. 2d4, especially on a saving throw, once per short rest, that is a great ability. You really get a lot right at level 1 with this subclass, yeah. So I like that a lot. Level 6, Empowered Healing. Starting at 6th level, the divine energy coursing through you can empower healing spells. Whenever you or an ally within 5 feet of you rolls dice to determine the number of hit points a spell restores, you can spend 1 sorcery point to re-roll any number of those dice once, provided you aren't incapacitated. You can use this feature only once per turn. This one I'm nowhere near as fond of. Sorcery points are a very valuable commodity, to be honest, and I would way rather use them for things like quicken spells, or twin spells, or hiding spells, or even like subtle spells, etc. Like, I'd way rather use them on Metamagic, I guess is what I'm saying, than to like re-roll dice for healing. Now, I'm not saying there's never a time when you might want to use this, especially if you're like about to rest anyway and you're going to get any sorcery points back that you would have spent on this. Go ahead, right? You're taking a long rest. The cleric decides he's going to heal a bunch of people, and you decide to use this. Why not? But in general, I feel like this ability is A, very expensive, and B, not that great. However, our level 1 abilities were awesome, so we can live with this. Otherworldly Wings, level 14. So you can use a bonus action to manifest a pair of spectral wings from your back. While the wings are present, you have a flying speed of 30 feet. The wings last until you are incapacitated, die, or dismiss them as a bonus action. So I like that as well. If I don't dismiss them, they're just there. The affinity you chose from your divine magic feature determines the appearance of the spectral wings. Eagle wings for good or law, bat wings for evil or chaos, and dragonfly wings for neutrality, which by the way is definitely the coolest choice. Nice dragonfly wings. Level 18, Unearthly Recovery. At 18th level, you gain the ability to overcome grievous injuries. As a bonus action, when you have fewer than half your hit points remaining, you can regain a number of hit points equal to half your hit point maximum. Once you use this feature, you can't use it again until you finish a long rest. This ability is actually pretty awesome, but it is rather limited. Like, you already have to be below half to use the feature, and if you've got, say, 120 hit points, just to pick a nice round number, and you're sitting at 70 hit points, you're like, man, I'm missing a lot of health, but not enough health to use this ability. And then you're like, well, do I get hit again so I can use this? That can be a little risky. But in general, a bonus action where you can restore half your hit points is pretty awesome. So again, it's an 18th level ability. It is circumstantial, but under those right circumstances, it becomes a great ability. So, I won't say no. Overall, though, I think that the Divine Soul Sorcerer is one where the first level abilities really shine. And both of them, honestly. Like, obviously, the Divine Magic is the best, but Favorite of the Gods is also a really, really nice ability. The other abilities, getting wings at 14th level is nice, the Empowered Healing is Unearthly Recovery is, better than but, still rather questionable at times. But it's really like that level 1 pair of abilities that are really carrying this class through. But those abilities are so good that the subclass becomes a really good choice. Still, I think that both of these subclasses from Tasha's I would rate above the Divine Soul, just because sorcerers often struggle so much with spells known, and having all these extra spells added to your spells known list is absolutely life-changing for a sorcerer. So it's pretty hard to beat those, but I definitely think that Divine Soul was the best sorcerer we had pre-Tashes. Anyways, moving on. Let's talk a little bit about feats. I think that there's a lot of really nice feat choices, and Tashes especially gave us some really nice ones. So these are, a rough list of the feats that I kind of like. We'll start with Telekinesis and Telepathy. I don't think these are the greatest feats, but you can use them to bump your charisma, which could be pretty nice. And, unlike something like, say, Elven Accuracy, this isn't requiring us to A, be some type of elf, or B, get advantage on those attacks, which, isn't always the hardest thing to do, right? But this one's pretty open and broad. Any race can take it. It doesn't really matter. So Telekinesis and Telepathy, both pretty good. Even better, though, in my opinion, are Fey Touched and Shadow Touched. I really like both these feats. They're absolutely great, especially Fey Touched, although both of them it's hard to say sometimes. But both of them are awesome. Can't go wrong there. I really like Metamagic Adept on Sorcerer. And that might seem like a weird choice because the whole purpose of that feat, you would think, is to put metamagics on a character who wouldn't normally have access to metamagic. The problem is that you're so restricted in the sorcery points that if you're playing something else, like let's say you're playing a paladin and you want a quicken spell, not a bad choice by any means, but you're really going to be like quickening like probably one spell a day kind of thing is what you're going to be doing, right? It doesn't really necessarily add as much to the class as one might think. But on a sorcerer who already has sorcery points and already has metamagic, this just lets you like broaden which abilities you can take. Adding more sorcery points is never a bad thing either. I think that this feat actually really, really shines on sorcerers, which is not necessarily very intuitive, but seems to be the way it works. Excellent feat for any subclass of sorcerer. I really like, in this specific case, the Ritual Caster or Magic Initiate Wizard. One or the other. I probably would take Ritual Caster, to be honest, between the two. But the reason is, even though I think these feats are both pretty decent feats, even, for most characters, but there's a lot of cleric spells that we might want to use in combat. Things like, say, Inflict Wounds or Cure Wounds or things of that nature, which all have a range of touch. And yes, we could take the distant spell metamagic, so there is that. But it also means that we could just have a familiar and deliver our touch spells with our familiar, which to me sounds way better actually. So I really like both of those options. And anytime for the rest of the video, if I talk about using distant spell as a metamagic, feel free to replace that with your familiar if you took one of these feats, okay? So, I won't keep mentioning it over and over again, but just always remember that that's an option, because I like them quite a bit. Obviously, you have Spell Sniper. This is especially nice if you wanted to play more of a blaster and you're planning on using a lot of attack roll type spells. Then Spell Sniper is great. Elemental Adept. I like this one better on the Dragon Ancestry, Draconic Ancestry usually, but it's not bad here. Definitely worth a mention, but I put this one a clear step below the other ones we've talked about. And then we also have Warcaster. But again, as much as I love Warcaster usually, and I'm a huge fan of this feat, because Sorcerer has proficiency on Constitution saving throws already, I find that this one isn't anywhere near as important on a Sorcerer as it is on a lot of others. Now, if I'm going to be multi-classing and I want to be able to maybe have a shield with a sword in my other hand and still be able to cast my spells, then something like Warcaster starts looking a lot better again. But for the purposes of this video, if I'm going to assume that you're taking basically a Divine Soul Sorcerer and that's what you're playing, we can't cover all the multi-classing possibilities, obviously, otherwise we'd be here forever. But if that's what you're playing and you're keeping yourself away from the combat and you've got other allies or summon minions or whatever that can kind of clutter up the battlefield and interpose themselves between you and the baddies, then I don't think it's as necessary, but definitely worth mentioning, of course. And then we have things like Lucky, which of course are just always a great general feat, and Alert, which is always a great general feat. So, we'll add those. But as someone who takes those feats a lot, I would definitely, if I were making a Divine Soul Sorcerer for a campaign, I would definitely steer towards some of these other ones, which I think are, just kind of fun and interesting, neat choices. Anyways, as far as the Metamagics, Twin becomes a really, really good choice if we want to be casting like buff spells, but can also be nice on some Cleric, like damage spells. Things like Inflict Wounds, for example, can be pretty nice as a twin spell. Extended spell, buffs and debuffs, but especially buffs, where you can like double the duration. You can start getting a lot more mileage out of them, and I like them quite a bit. Obviously, Quicken spell, especially by multi-classing, but even on a straight class sorcerer, Quicken spell is kind of game changing, honestly. The ability to turn something that's normally in action into a bonus action can be pretty groundbreaking. So, you can never go wrong there. When in doubt, take Quicken, in my opinion. The subtle spell is very nice as well, of being able to avoid using like verbal components and stuff. Especially, it can be very nice. Heightened, of course, if we want to be able to give people disadvantage on saving throws, very good. Empowered, if we want to be using a lot of blasty type spells, nice. And I already mentioned Distant earlier. Usually I don't put a lot of stock on Distant, to be honest. I don't consider it, it's kind of a lower tier. Maybe a 2 out of 5 is probably where I'd rank it. It's not terrible, but usually your spells have enough range to do what you want them to do. But that's not necessarily true if I'm taking a bunch of Cleric spells, because usually a Cleric is going to have medium or even heavy armor. They might have a shield. They've got a D8 hit dice. They can kind of hang around that front line a little more than my D6 sorcerer with no armor, right? And so I feel like Distant starts looking a little better on this particular subclass. And then finally we have Seeking. Again, Seeking is not one of my top tier choices, but in certain types of play styles, it can be pretty good, especially if you're trying to play kind of a more blasty type of character, right? Then, Seeking is pretty decent. So the ones I really, really like the most, though, are probably Twin, Extended, Subtle, Quicken, and probably Heightened, I guess, would be my next pick, right? Not necessarily in that order, just saying those are kind of my more elite choices. But all the ones on that list are at least pretty useful. So anyways, moving on to Cleric spells. For cantrips, there's really one absolute standout, which I would definitely take, and that is the Guidance cantrip. In fact, Guidance is something I may even twin occasionally under certain circumstances. Like maybe we need people to be able to do a couple of different things at once, and maybe whatever. And being able to twin that is actually kind of nice. I can't believe that I would ever twin a cantrip usually, but that one might be worth considering. I might also want Toll the Dead. In general, I find that I kind of like the attack roll cantrips better, especially as I level up more and I start getting more dice of damage, because they could potentially crit. If I'm able to attack with advantage, it makes it a lot more likely they're going to land. But every now and then, you might have disadvantage on attack roll, and having something that I can hit people with where, it's a saving throw instead, there's no attack roll, that can be kind of handy too. So, Toll the Dead, not a terrible choice. Anyways, moving on to our level 1 spells. And there are quite a few great options from the Cleric spell list. Number 1, let's talk about Bless. Now, Bless does come for free if you chose Affinity with Law. So, pretty hard to go wrong there. You could have already gotten that just for free with the level 1 abilities. I really like Bless with Quicken, because now I can Quicken cast the Bless spell, I can include myself in that, and now when I make an attack, let's say I cast Firebolt or whatever else, right? Then I'm going to be able to get the benefits of that Bless spell immediately. And, and then if I get hit and I take damage, I've also got Bless to help me maintain concentration as well, which is pretty nice. You might also consider something like distant, but generally I find the range on bless is usually pretty good. It's not that hard to coordinate with your allies and make sure the people you want to hit are in range, right? I wouldn't really consider extended. I mean, usually the fight's going to be over in a minute, so no real purpose there. But quicken, definitely a solid choice. Command, not bad. Either heightened or twinned can be okay. You know, it's a first level kind of a crowd control type spell. Could be a lot worse, that's for sure. Guiding Bolt can actually be pretty fun. It does a decent chunk of damage. It's radiant, which is, you know, the best damage to be doing probably, or at least one of them. You know, being able to twin that is kind of fun, and maybe hitting 2 targets, that can be all right. Overall, you know, it's kind of a fun spell. It does a good chunk of damage. It could be pretty decent. Inflict Wounds, I already mentioned. This is one that actually does a good chunk of damage, scales fairly well, and especially, like I said, if you have distant or, you know, a familiar to use with it, it can really be a lot safer for you and a lot nicer. The other option, of course, is to use something like Twin Spell, which is also good. You know, now you inflict wounds on 2 different creatures. Protection from evil and good, pretty handy, especially twinned. Now you can protect 2 of your allies. Same with Sanctuary. Can be. I find Sanctuary is a little more circumstantial, but you know, it can single-handedly prevent characters from dying, which is pretty handy when you're level 1 and nobody has Revivify. Let's see. Oh, and Protection from Evil Good is one that you got for free as well if you have neutrality. Cure Wounds you get for free as good. You know, being able to quicken that basically turns it into a healing word almost. Being able to twin it and healing 2 people, even better. Bane we get for free with Chaos. Bane, as we all know, is generally not quite as good as Bless. Kind of similar roles, but there's no saving throw. Bless is just going to automatically affect your allies, and Bane could potentially affect nothing. But that being said, Bane still isn't a bad spell. I kind of like, again, I like Quicken on this one. I also kind of like Extended Spell on this one. Or, sorry, not Extended, what am I saying? Distant, there we go. Jeez, I was thinking Extended the range. Distant, because it's only a 30-foot range, and it's easy to make sure your allies are all within range for Bless. It's sometimes a lot more difficult to make sure your enemies are all in range for Bane. So being able to double the range, you know, can be potentially nice. Overall, though, I think Bane's a weaker choice than some of the others we've talked about so far. Oh yeah, and of course Healing Word. Okay, I almost forgot Healing Word. Obviously Healing Word is a great spell, we all know that. Being able to twin it is even better, of course. Pretty hard to go wrong there. Anyways, level 2. So ones I really like here. Aid with Extended Spell. Yes, and I mean extended this time, not distant. Being able to double the duration on Aid allows you to do, like, Aid already lasts 8 hours, right? So you double that to 16, you can literally like cast Aid with Extended Spell, take a long rest, get the spell and all your sorcery points back again, and it's still going to last for the majority of your next adventuring day. So, you know, that's pretty awesome. Enhanceability, twinned especially, but, you know, you can possibly extend it as well. But I find that I don't think it lasts long enough to really make extend useful, but twinned is pretty nice. Blindness, Deafness. It's a really great debuff, especially the blindness portion on most creatures. And it doesn't require concentration, which is very nice. It does target Constitution, which is unfortunate, but something like a heightened spell can be pretty handy here, giving them disadvantage on the saving throw. And, you know, nothing wrong with that. I like blindness deafness quite a bit. I mean, you could also twin it as well if you catch it in the second level spell slot. Not the worst choice ever. Silence with the subtle spell casting, Metamagic. That can be kind of fun because you could literally exclude yourself from the silenced area. Now, to be honest, 15 feet you could probably cast that from far enough away that you're not going to be in the area anyways. But for those rare fights where you're fighting in like a 20 by 20 room and basically everything's going to be blanketed, you can be like, you know what, I'm going to cast Silence, and either with like subtle magics, now I don't have to worry about the verbal component, or with Careful, I guess it could even work, and now you just leave yourself out. That can work okay. Subtle, though, I find is just generally really handy anyways, so being able to silence everything and then still cast your spells because you now don't need a verbal component thanks to Subtle, that does eat through your spell points pretty quickly, or your sorcery points pretty quickly, though, if you're casting a lot of spells on top of that. But, that can be kind of a fun combination. Let's see, I already mentioned Aid. So I guess let's mention Spiritual Weapon. Because I never feel like Spiritual Weapon is a bad choice. But it is going to be eating up my bonus action a lot. And if I want to be, especially if I'm going to be quick in casting a lot of spells, Spiritual Weapon may not be a great fit. But it's definitely worth mentioning because maybe I didn't take Quicken, or maybe we're doing like a lot of dungeon crawls and stuff, and I need to be careful with my sorcery points. Maybe I can't be just Quicken casting spells every single round of every single combat. In which case, having something like a Spiritual Weapon to help bolster that damage can be really, really handy as well, right? So it's definitely worth mentioning. I think that it's more of a like auto pick on a lot of other classes, whereas due to the interaction with things like Quicken Spell, we may not have as much use for Spiritual Weapon as we normally would, but it's still a good choice, and it's definitely, at least worth talking about, right? So moving on to level 3, I'll try to hurry things up a little bit here. Anyways, Animate Dead. I like this one with Extended Spell. I've mentioned Animate Dead before. I love using things like Animated Dead as like scouts. I love sending them down dungeon hallways, and then if there's a pit trap or a spear trap or a collapsing stone trap, crushes my skeleton or my zombie instead of the party members, which is way better. And of course, they can also help bolster our forces in combat. And if you look at the Sorcerer spell list, one thing they're definitely lacking in is any sort of summons for the most part. They have, that is one of the biggest differences between Sorcerer and Wizard spell list, is there's just no summoning spells. So, grabbing Animate Dead from the Cleric spell list, possibly extending it and getting twice the length out of their service, that could be pretty good. Or Vitality with Extended Spell can be pretty fun. Beacon of Hope with Extended Spell can be kind of fun, not as good as Aura of Vitality, I find, because if we need to concentrate on that, we actually can't use it with an Aura of Vitality ourselves, which would really just be a great combo. But maybe you got somebody else who wants to cast it, in which case, it can work, right? You cast one, they cast the other kind of thing. Not bad. Bestow Curse is one that I wrote down. I'm kind of iffy on this one. Again, it's a touch spell, but it does have some really nice abilities attached to it. It's just we're already so pressed for third level spell slots usually because we're competing with things like Counterspell, Fireball, Hypnotic Pattern, etc. Fly, Dispel Magic. There's so many great choices at third level that it starts getting really hard to fit some of these more fringe choices in. But, either twinned, heightened, distance, it can be okay. I definitely put it as a lower tier choice though. And of course we've also got Spirit Guardians. And this one's definitely worth talking about because Spirit Guardians, in my opinion, is one of the best Cleric spells, especially for like lower level, like third or below. I absolutely love Spirit Guardians. But I love it on characters that have some sort of armor and hopefully some hit points. I think that if we multi-class with this, the Spirit Guardians is amazing, especially with like Quicken Spell. If we're going straight Sorcerer though, I may not want to be that close that I'm able to hit everything with my Spirit Guardians. Now maybe I do want to still, right? So that's why I wanted to talk about it, is because I don't think it's like, it's only good for Cleric, so it's only good if you like multi-class with Paladin or something like that, right? Or Warlock or whatever else, something like Hexblade, whatever, right? Fighter, whatever, I think it's only good. And that's not necessarily true, like you could combine it with like flying against things that can't fly, and you just fly like 10 or 15 feet overhead and blast everything with Spirit Guardians round after round. there are some pretty cool combinations with that, right? You have wings at level 14 that you don't need to concentrate on. So you concentrate on your Spirit Guardians and you just fly around. That can be awesome. But I also don't think that it's as strong as it is in a lot of other cases, right? So this would be one that, while usually it's just a no-brainer take for me, I may not choose because it's competing with so many other good spells already at 3rd level. That, on a straight sorcerer with, 14 armor class or whatever, and, terrible hit points, doesn't look as strong. But like I said, you can still make it work, so I'm not saying don't choose it. I'm just saying, it's not as strong as it is in other cases. So level 4, moving on. We got Banishment, not bad, especially heightened or even quickened. Possibly even twinned, although once we get to higher level, we can just upcast and affect more targets anyway. But heightened especially, all of these like all or nothing spells where if they fail their saving throw, we win, and if they make their saving throw, then I just wasted a spell slot and my turn. Those are a pretty big investment. So if I can give them disadvantage on the saving throw, especially if I'm banishing things like fiends and stuff, a lot of them have magic resistance and have advantage on the saving throw, in which case this suddenly becomes a really, really risky gamble, so at worst, I can give them, just regular saving throw, but at best, maybe they don't have magic resistance and we can, get them out of here. Death Ward, either twinned or extended. This spell can be really, really awesome. Lasting 16 hours is great. Death Warding 2 people is also great. So, hard to go wrong there. Freedom of movement, especially twin, but, I'm quickened as well, of course, is really solid. But yeah, especially twin, you get 2 or 3 people, all your melee types, your barbarian and your champion fighters got caught in the web. Twin it, get them both out of there. Now they can actually do their job and get up in people's faces, Level 5. Holy Weapon, either twinned or extended, pretty good. Being able to, buff 2 people's weapons and give them a bunch of extra damage is really nice. Or if maybe you only got that one guy who, you got like that fighter who's level 11 and action surges every single chance he gets, or maybe every fight because you guys short rest after every fight so he can action surge again the next fight. That kind of guy is really great with Holy Weapon, just doing extra damage every hit. Contagion, also not a bad choice. Twinned, extended, heightened, all solid choices there. Level 6, Heal, twinned or quickened. I mean, one of the reasons we love Healing Words so much is because it's just a bonus action, although it's also ranged and it's also level 1 spell. Those are all great reasons to love Healing Word. But, casting Heal as a bonus action is also pretty awesome. So, there's that. Being able to twin it, though, like, party gets hit with a Dragon Breath weapon and a bunch of people are, about to go down because half of them made their saving throw and half failed or whatever. Being able to heal 2 people is way better than healing 1, especially when one of those people might have been yourself, although you probably have a absorb element, so breath weapon's not so bad for you. But either way, great spell. Conversely, Harm is not a bad choice either. It does a ton of damage. You could twin that, you could distance spell it, you could heighten spell it and make it more likely that they fail that saving throw. Harm does quite a bit of damage, so not a bad choice. There's also, of course, my favorite of the 6th level cleric spells, Hero's Feast. Extending that could be pretty hilarious actually, because now it's just like rolling over day after day pretty much. Pretty awesome. I love Hero's Feast. Of course, I love it even more when I'm casting with the Wish spell. That way I don't have to worry about the components. Anyways, moving on. You might also consider something like Planar Ally. Not really any Metamagic to go with it per se, but just being able to summon some super powerful creature to serve you can be kind of fun. I especially like to pretend that I'm summoning my actual ancestor whatever divine or servant of my ancestor, whatever divine creature like infused by lineage with our magical divine blood. Maybe I'm summoning him as my planar ally. That just makes it a little more fun. And maybe I can convince the DM to kind of lower that generally horrific price that we have to pay to this thing in order to gain his service. But fun RP stuff there. Level 7, Conjure Celestial. So speaking of summoning minions of my ancestor, Conjure Celestial, also a great fun choice. Again, no specific metamagic to go with it, mostly an RP thing, but also because, Quaddle are great, and Holophants are pretty decent too, and, unicorns, and maybe you get Pegasus, but, whatever. If you're like me, though, and your game uses, half a dozen Monster Manual type books, including, the Monster Manual, Volos, Mordenkainen's, and then we've got the Tome of Beasts 1 and 2, and the Creature Codex from Cobalt Press that we use in my games. If you've got 6 books to choose from, there's usually enough good quality Celestials, even of like lower CR ratings, that you can make that spell work. If all your dungeon master uses is the Monster Manual, then it's nowhere near as good. Your choices become a lot more limited then. Anyways, Divine Word is just a really, really fun spell. So, I kind of like the idea of using distance on it to change the range from 30 feet to 60 feet. 30 feet is, a lot harder to hit everything I might want to hit with a spell like that. 60 feet, I'm probably good though. Level 8, Anti-Magic Field. This one can be kind of fun if you really need to just screw over everybody, including your own party members. That can be a good time. Usually I do not take the spell ever, but it's just so funny that how do you avoid taking it? And maybe you can exclude yourself from it, and then you're the only one with magic, and that can be kind of nice. Level 9. Granted, I'm already taking Wish, so I've got limited choices here for what else I'm going to take. But Mass Heal is a pretty good choice, especially like Quicken It. Hard to go wrong there. So anyways, those are my thoughts on the Divine Soul Sorcerer. I'm actually excited that I hadn't covered the class before, because like I said, it's one of my absolute favorites. And like I said, pre-Tashes, I think it was the best Sorcerer subclass we have. And even post-Tashes, it's still pretty darn good. It's still very, very strong, And I do really like that sort of flavor as well. Like the whole idea of the sorcerer gaining their magic through some sort of lineage and blood magic type of power is already a pretty intriguing concept. So, why not have it be some sort of divine being or angel or whatever else? That just seems like a pretty natural fit in a lot of ways, right? So, like I said, I really, really enjoy it. In our next video, we're actually going to cover the Storm Soul, there we go, Sorcerer. So, there's 3 in Xanathar's. One was the Shadow, which we kind of covered in our multi-class with Rogue. One's the Divine Soul, and then one's the Storm Soul, which is still not awful. It's not like it's the Mastermind or the Inquisitive Rogues, for example, or anything like that, It's not any monk prior to Mercy, so it could definitely be worse. But it's definitely on the weaker side of Sorcerer. However, I do think that there is some intriguing possibilities, especially when we multi-class it. So, we're going to cover the base class in the next video with Storm Soul, but we will look at some of those other options as well, because I think that it sometimes gets underrated as a multi-class choice. The extra mobility and stuff that it gives you can be really nice on certain classes. It's just that on a class that generally plays way near the back, using ranged attacks anyways, it's a pretty mild importance, to be honest. And some of the other abilities aren't so great either. It's not terrible, like I said, It's no Way of the Four Elements monk, but I think it is on, if we got our Sorcerer tier list here with our, Aberrant and Clockwork and Divine Soul and everything, Shadow. This one's down here somewhere, So, but anyways, we haven't covered it before, so we will cover it, and that'll be the next video. So, anyways, thank you for watching. As always, feel free to like, subscribe, ring the bell for notifications, and most importantly, leave me your comments in the comment section. I promise to watch. I promise I read all the comments, even if I don't necessarily respond. So that's going to be the next video. Oh, and then the one after that is going to be a Sorcerer Fighter multi-class, and we're probably going to be looking at a lot more direct damage spells. And I tried to contact, I have a viewer by the name of Rob Vera, so if you watch this, Rob, I tried to message you, but you never responded. But anyways, he is always making suggestions for like damage sorcery builds, and so I'm going to use some of my stuff. I'm going to take some of his stuff if it's okay. That's why I'm mentioning it right now. So if he watches this video, feel free to let me know if I have your permission to use some of the ideas you've mentioned in my comment section, because some of them are excellent, and I want to, give credit where it's due. I don't want to just steal your ideas and pretend they were mine. So, let's be clear about that. Not all this will be my own stuff. Some of it will be the suggestions of one of my more fanatical viewers who leaves comments on every one of my videos, which I definitely appreciate, but also has just a lot of great ideas and input of his own. So I want to, give credit where it's due, and not just steal other people's concepts, right? But anyway, so those are going to be the next 2 videos, and then after that we're probably going to be going into the Warlock multi-classing tier list, and have some Warlock videos after that, of course. But anyways, that's everything. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye.